This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
This is episode number 66 of Debt Free in 30, and since this is a weekly show, that means we've been on the air for more than 15 months, and I can tell you based on the download statistics I get for the podcast version of this show, my most popular guest in the last 65 weeks is none other than Gail Vaz-Oxlade, host of 3 television shows, her own radio show, and the author of many books, including a brand new book that we're going to talk about today. Gail was my guest back on show number 3, and she gave a very interesting explanation for why she has no desire to go back to being a host of a reality TV show. So if you haven't listened to that episode, check it out on our website at hoyes.com or on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. So what's Gail been up to since we last talked? Let's find out. Gail, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am great, Doug. How are you?
I am great. It's fantastic to have you back on. We're recording this on December the 1st, 2015, if I've got my calendar right, and it will be released as a podcast and on the radio on December 5th. And I understand that on Tuesday, December 8th, the new book hits the shelves in the bookstore. So is this the first podcast interview you've done about this book, Gail?
Absolutely is. And I am so excited for this new book. Like, I cannot even begin to tell you. My toes are curling.
Well, so let's hear about it then. What's the name of the book?
Okay, so the book's called Money Talks, with the subtitle When to Say Yes and How to Say No. And it is... The whole idea behind this book is that how we communicate about our money is what's at the root of whether the money is working for us in our relationships. Very often people will say, money is one of the things that causes relationships to fall to rack and ruin. And my premise in writing this book is that, you know what? If we don't start talking about this, if we don't start getting better at communicating what our needs and wants are to our family, to our friends, to our mates, then we will just keep on this sort of hamster wheel of making money become a problem in our lives instead of being no more than a means of making a transaction.
So money is a medium of exchange then, is what you're saying?
That's right. Money, that's all money is. But how we respond to each other, that has a big influence on what we end up doing with our money.
So money isn't the problem, we're the problem.
There's a line in the book that says, we are the problem. How we behave, what we do with our money, and how we communicate about it, that's at the root of most of the challenges that we face and blame on our money.
So we say, my problem is I don't have enough money. I don't think too many people complain about having too much money.
But there are more things. There are the things about, not being able to get our mates to make a budget, not being able to impress upon our sister that our couch is not her ongoing bed, not being able to communicate with our parents that, listen, dudes, don't think I'm your retirement plan because I got my own crap going on. And if you think that you're moving into my basement because you made me, then we need to talk about this.
And the same with your kids, I guess.
Totally the same with your kids. One of the things that I try to impress upon parents is that if you are enabling your children, if you are constantly bailing out your kids, what are they going to do when you drop dead?
Yeah, they got a big problem. So, well, and I've always said to my kids, I got 2 teenage boys, I've said, you know what? When I'm gone, I'm leaving all of my money to a cat charity. And I don't have any cats. I don't particularly like cats. But the point is, well, you're not going to get any of it. So you better go out there and earn your own money, make your own way.
And I've said exactly the same thing to my kids.
Cool.
And absolutely. It's, because, Doug, I have watched people who have sat and waited for their relatives to die to solve their financial issues, because they think that if they can spend all the money they want right now, they don't have to save anything for retirement. If they rack up a lot of debt, it's okay because there's this $1 trillion inheritance that the media has been talking about for years. And I'm here to tell you that $1 trillion inheritance is going to go into health care and personal care for your folks because they're going to live a long, long time and all the money's going to be gone.
Wow, yeah, you're right. If my parents lived to be 90 and from 80 to 90 they're heavy consumers of healthcare services, you're right. That money ends up getting eaten up. So you're saying that we're unwilling to talk about money. Why? Why the big secret? What's the issue?
I scratch my head. Okay. The thing is that what we've done is we've allowed a lot of emotion to link itself up to our money. So one of the things I talk about in the book is the fact that other people are very good at pushing our emotional buttons. And by pushing those emotional buttons, they can derive the reaction that they're looking for. But really, it goes even further back than that, because parents seem unwilling to talk to their kids about money, how it works, what you can or cannot do with it. Even as we are raising children in a world where we know that if we don't educate our kids about money, what we're doing is sending them off into the wolves' hands. So I think this whole thing about money and not talking about it is so rooted in us. It doesn't really matter where it started. The fact is, until we cut it out, until we get rid of this monster emotional attachment to our privacy, just think of all those guys that do those articles and they hold up newspapers in front of their faces, or they hold up buckets of popcorn in front of their faces. They're perfectly happy to share their financial deets, but only if nobody knows who they are.
So we have no trouble talking to our kids about, you shouldn't do drugs and you shouldn't drink and drive.
Mm-hmm.
But
But money, which is like something that everybody has to deal with in their life, and it's no more emotional than the paper and coin of which it's made. Paper and coin is not emotional. That's the thing that we don't want to have a conversation with our kids. We don't want to tell them how much we earn. We don't want to tell them what we're spending for rent or what we're paying for our car payments. I don't understand it.
is it a power thing?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. And that's one of the things that I talk about in the book, this whole idea of power and control and how we use money to sort of maintain our sense of power and control. It's lousy, Doug, because let's face it, the last thing you want to do is teach your children that the person who has more money has power and control over them. You want your children to grow up strong and healthy and knowing the place money should play in their life, not believing that he who has the most money has the most power.
And I would assume that can have a pretty detrimental effect on relationships as well.
Absolutely. And so the book deals with a whole bunch of power issues that people are sort of still coming to grips with, this whole idea of primary breadwinner syndrome. The guy who makes all the money gets to make all the decisions, or, we'll just keep little old sweetheart in the dark about what we're doing with our money because what she doesn't know can't hurt her. Bullying is a big issue in couples where one person ends up being a financial bully in the relationship. Then there's the person who takes a very patriarchal approach. And this is not just men. The patriarchal or matriarchal approach can be women as well. But, this whole idea that I'm in control here, and I'll make the decisions about what's going to be happening with our money.
Yeah, and that has a horrible effect if it's typical now that women outlive men.
Mm-hmm.
And so if in a traditional setup, the man is making all the financial decisions, or even just he's the one who writes the checks, if we still write checks anymore, and then he passes away 5 or 10 years before his wife does, and now all of a sudden, late in life, she's got to figure out how it all works, that's got to be pretty damaging as well, I would think.
And I've actually seen role reversal on that. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book, the role reversal, because we now have dynamic where women are making more than their male partners, and that's having some significant impact on how they relate to each other. Again, it should not. I mean, if you take the emotion out of it and you deal with the resource this family has, then it's not about the emotion attached to it. But unfortunately, there is emotion attached to it. And so you have to figure out the words to use in order to take the emotion out and make this be a discussion about resources, not about power and control. And that's one of the things that I've done in the book that's a little bit different, is that I have created dozens and dozens of scenarios where people will see themselves or see people they know and love and finally come to some sort of understanding about what the dynamic is that's going on there.
So it's almost a series of 50 different plays or whatever, if you want to look at it
That's
that
right.
way.
There are about 70 scenarios in the book, and the idea being that if you can see yourself in this scenario, you're much more likely to understand why you have to take the steps that you have to take. Because every chapter deals with, you know, my advice to you in terms of dealing with the denial issue or the entitlement issue or the, control issue. But also, here are the steps you're going to have to take if you want to be the person who fixes this problem. You don't fix the problem, you can't whine about the fact that the problem continues to exist.
So if someone is listening to this today and they're in a relationship where their spouse is either, overly controlling or whatever the opposite of overly controlling is, and they realize there's a problem, what you're saying is you've got a scenario in this book that talks about how to identify that and then what to do about it, how to play it out?
Absolutely. And I give the words. I give you words that you can wrap your head and your tongue around. I'm not saying that these are the only words you should use, but at least there's a starting point for the language that you can use, because I've had heaps and heaps of experience with this. I mean, after working with all those people on television, believe you me, I had to come up with some tactful ways of saying some things. And so some of this is tact, and some of it is just straight up telling the truth. Because I believe with all my heart that until we tell each other the truth about what we're feeling and how we are responding, what we're doing is we are creating a mythology that can't hold. There's no way we can keep this mythology going forever. And so what will happen is eventually the whole thing will dissolve and we'll just get bitten in the butt.
So can you give me an example of the wrong way to do something, or the traditional way that gets people into trouble? Any one of these scenarios. I mean, we'll make people buy the book so they can find out how to do it right. But what's an example of the wrong way to do something? Words we use that are wrong, inflammatory words. How do we make mistakes in these areas?
Well, in part 2, which is called Changing the Game, the idea is that people really hate change, and that as human beings, we suffer from something called recency effect, meaning that we believe that wherever we are now is where we're always going to be. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes is that people cast themselves in the role of the nagger. And so what we start to do is, we go, we jump on every little thing that the person does. And we're not about changing behavior in a productive way that will be sustainable. We sort of resort to picking on things that are really less relevant than the thing that's actually the elephant in the room. And so, I try to encourage people to not take on the role of the nagger, understanding that when you nag, what happens is eventually, and this is the title of the chapter, I can't hear you. People just plug their ears. And so if you want to bring about real change in a mate, in a sibling, even in your parents, you need to walk away from the nagging role, and you need to deal with whatever it is you have to deal with in a very straightforward, very truthful, very loving, but very firm way.
Because we're not in grade 2, I guess.
Well, it's not even a matter of not being in grade 2. I can't tell you how many times I've seen scenarios play out where people think that the nyeh is going to work. Like, really? In what world would you want to be nagged like that? So, part of understanding how your mate is responding or how your sister is responding is putting yourself in their shoes and listening to yourself for a minute. Because if you sound like that, horrible harridan, then nobody's going to hear what you have to say.
Well, and this is why I've always liked your approach. What you're really saying at its very core is we got to think. We got to take responsibility for ourselves. If the people I interact with in my life, aren't behaving the way I want them to behave, it's really a problem with me, not a problem with them.
Well, it's part of a problem with you and a problem with them, because let's take the example of Peter Pan, okay? And this is something that psychologists have studied for a while, and so we know it's a thing, Peter Pan syndrome, and all the people who plunge themselves into the Wendy role, they share this dynamic. And so you need to understand what the dynamic is. Sure, you can identify. We've seen lots of people say, it's a boy man. But what do you do about it? How do you change the dynamic? Or how do you change your own life so you're not having to live in this dynamic anymore? And sometimes that change is really, really hard to make. But if you are not prepared to make the change, then at the very least, stop whining.
Because the whining isn't doing anybody any good.
No, it's not. And so if you love this person so much that you're prepared to put up with his or her crap, then put up with his or her crap. Don't then turn around and make yourself into the victim, because really you have accepted that role. If you don't want that role, I have a way for you to get out of that role.
And you're talking about the dynamic in families, relationships, but I guess this extends to just, coworkers and friends as well. You got that guy at work who always wants to borrow $20 till payday.
Absolutely.
And
so that's exactly one of the scenarios that I talk about. The whole idea that there are always people who seem to be willing to tap your wallet, whether it be for a short-term loan or, yet one more collection at work for the gift. This thing has always boggled my mind. People come to work with us. We don't throw them a party. We're going to spend the next 6 months, 6 years, 16 years with this person, but we don't welcome them. Instead, what we do is we wait for them to be leaving, and then we throw them a party.
And so the scenarios you talk about in the book are, one of them is how to not be bailing people out all the time?
Yep. How to say it with kindness and love, but say it quite explicitly. I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you tap my wallet anymore.
And I think in a lot of cases, I've dealt with people, I've had to do bankruptcies for people, and I say, what happened? Well, I helped out my kids, I helped out my friend, and they weren't able to pay me back. And I'm going, well, I'm absolutely a big fan of helping people out. I think that's fantastic, but I don't believe in going deep into debt to do it. If you can help someone out with the cash in your pocket, that's your cash. Great, fantastic. But when you have to go into debt to do it, you're causing yourself a great deal of difficulty. So you've got scenarios in here to, help us understand how far we should go, or more the words to not get into that mess in the first place.
Well, the recognizing that there are people out there using guilt as an emotional button, or using fear, if you can't find a way to help your brother, then you're not the child I thought you were. What kind of,
Yeah.
It's like a parental bullying. Very often I get letters from people who explain situations to me, and what they're looking for is the way to say no. They don't have the words to say no, because every expectation is that they're going to say yes, which is why the subtitle is when to say yes and how to say no. And so people will write to me and they'll say, how do I say no to this? And so I give them the words. And that's really where this book came from. It came from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters that I get from people asking me, Gail, what do I say?
And so you've been working on this book for a while then?
I have been working on this book for a while. I think this is, when I first started, Doug, when I wrote Debt Free Forever, it was a process book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Debt Free Forever is all about how to make a debt repayment plan, how to create a budget, how to set some goals for yourself, how to start saving. It's the foundation book. When I wrote Never Too Late, it's how to save for retirement. And so there are process books that I have written. When I got to Money Rules, it was my final attempt to get the common sense of money out there. These are all the things you should have told your children that you didn't. At least go buy them the book and hand it to them, okay? So things like renting is not a waste of money.
Yep, I agree.
Some people have to rent.
Yep.
Okay, home ownership is not for everyone. Things like embrace anticipation. Things like it's not your money till it's in the bank. Because I've had people write to me long, sad letters about how they were going to get a bonus, went out and spent the money on their credit card, and oh, woe is me, the bonus never came through, and so now they're in debt. It's not their fault. Hello? It's not your money until it's in the bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the common sense of money. What this is I think the last piece that's missing. Nobody has actually done this before. Nobody has actually talked about how you have these conversations with the people in your life. How do you say to somebody you love, you know what? You're an instant gratification junkie, and we need to talk about that. Or, I can't go on that vacation with you because in good conscience, I can't watch you spend money you haven't saved for something stupid. So I love you. You are my friend. I would love to go on a vacation with you, but you have to show me you have the money in the bank before I'm prepared to do that, because I can't come back and listen to your whining for the next 6 months.
Well, that's a great way to end the segment. So the book is called Money Talks, When to Say Yes and How to Say No. Gail Vaz-Oxlade's new book hits the stores December the 8th. Gail, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
You're listening to Debt Free in 30 with Doug Hoyes. We'll be right back.
If you have debts, you need a plan, like a consumer proposal. How does it work? Give us 30 minutes and we'll show you how to work out a plan. It's that simple. No referral fees, no upfront fees, no pressure. To find out more, visit Hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com or call 310-PLAN. And let's get started.
You're listening to Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Welcome back. It's time for the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. On today's show, Gail Vaz-Oxlade told us about her new book, Money Talks, When to Say Yes and How to Say No, where she presents dozens of examples of how to talk to friends and family members about money. That's the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. As Gail said during the show, she's written books in the past about the process of budgeting and money management, but this book is entirely about helping you see your situation through stories that reflect what you may be experiencing. Her hope is that by recognizing your situation, you can learn the actual words to say to negotiate a solution. That's a subject that I don't think has been covered in any current book about money, so it should be a great help to many people dealing with money problems. That's our show for today. Full show notes are available on our website, including links to Gail's website and information on where you can buy her new book. So please go to our website at Hoyes.com, that's HOYES.com, for more information. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.
Thanks for listening. That was Debt Free in 30.